हेलो एंड वेलकम। आप देख रहे हैं बिग बॉस बिग आइडिया और आज के हमारे खास मेहमान हैं मिस्टर प्रमोद गुब्बी, फाउंडर मार्सलस इन्वेस्टमेंट मैनेजमेंट की। प्रमोद सेल्स और मार्केटिंग वर्टिकल को हेड करते हैं मार्सलस में और साथ में ही इन्वेस्टमेंट स्ट्रेटजीज डिजाइनिंग में भी वो कंपनी की मदद करते हैं। मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर और हेड ऑफ इंस्टीट्यूशनल इक्विटीज रह चुके हैं एम्बेड कैपिटल में फ्रॉम 2016 टू 2018। Besides that, he's a technology guy, technology analyst भी रह सकते हैं। प्रमोद has served in technology firms. उन्होंने सेमीकंडक्टर फर्म्स में भी काम किया है एज बिजनेस डेवलपमेंट एंड इंजीनियरिंग क्षेत्र में। उन्हीं से जानते हैं कि उनका जो इंटरेस्ट है वो एक आईटी एनालिस्ट से बिजनेस डेवलपमेंट से स्टॉक्स में कैसे आया। उनकी जर्नी पे हम चर्चा करेंगे, उन्हीं से बातचीत करेंगे। वेलकम प्रमोद।
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
आपका जैसा। शुरुआत करते हैं हम आपकी जर्नी से। आप एक टेक्नोलॉजी एनालिस्ट भी रह चुके हैं, बहुत सारी टेक्नोलॉजी फर्म्स में भी काम कर चुके हैं, सेमीकंडक्टर फर्म्स में भी काम कर चुके हैं और आपने बिजनेस डेवलपमेंट किया है फॉर एम्बेड कैपिटल, वहाँ के मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर भी रह चुके हैं। आपकी जर्नी बताइए फ्रॉम एन business development to really getting into investing into stock markets and analyzing them or recommending PMS services भी आप provide करते हैं। तो आप अपनी जर्नी के बारे में कुछ बताइए।
हाँ जी। No, it's been an interesting journey. मैं जब इंजीनियरिंग से पास आउट हुआ, I was lucky. मैं कंपनी ज्वाइन किया फिलिप्स सेमीकंडक्टर्स। अभी फिलिप्स सेमीकंडक्टर्स रहा नहीं, वो NXT बन के I think it is part of Broadcom now, but it was one of the pioneering semiconductor companies in the world. वहाँ पे मैं इंजीनियर रहा, मतलब डिजाइन इंजीनियर रहा। तो मैं चला गया IIM अहमदाबाद मेरी MBA करने। उसके बाद मुझे वापस टेक्नोलॉजी इंडस्ट्री में जाना था, तो मैंने ज्वाइन किया HCL टेक्नोलॉजी। इस बार इंजीनियर होके नहीं, लेकिन बिजनेस डेवलपमेंट एग्जीक्यूटिव होके ज्वाइन किया, बिकॉज आई कुड कंबाइन my engineering knowledge with what I had learned from at IIM Ahmedabad. फिर मैं मिला मेरे कॉलीग अब 18 साल के दोस्त सौरभ मुखर्जी से। वो एक बिजनेस चलाते थे कॉल्ड क्लियर कैपिटल, जो इक्विटी रिसर्च कंपनी था। दैट अप्रोच टू इक्विटी रिसर्च एक्साइटेड मी, क्योंकि दैट वे I could actually use my training, my qualifications, और जो एक्सपीरियंस था उसको यूज करके आई कुड एनालाइज द टेक्नोलॉजी स्टॉक्स बेटर एंड हेंस होपफुली मैं अपने क्लाइंट्स को अच्छे तरीके से रेकमेंड कर सकता था। फिर हम जब 2008 में यूके से इंडिया रिसर्च करने लगे, that's when I moved from research to business development. 2008 to 2016 में वो करता रहा। बीच में 3 साल I had shifted to Singapore, where I was advising institutional investors based out of Singapore and Hong Kong. And in 2016, when Saurabh started looking at the asset management business, I came back to head the institutional equities business at Ambit. और यहाँ पे तीनों वर्टिकल्स हेड करने पड़े अक्रॉस रिसर्च, सेल्स एंड ट्रेडिंग। और 2018 में जब हम सोच रहे थे कि चलो अब खुद का कुछ बनाते हैं, like they say, the entrepreneurial bug had bit you. That's when Saurabh, me and a few other colleagues decided to set up Marcellus. Marcellus में मेरा you can say two broad hats I cover. I take primary responsibility for business development, जहाँ पे capital raising, fund raising होता है. So that's been my journey. It's been very fascinating. The world of equities is very fascinating. It's not easy. It seems like it is easy. But if you are interested, you can really build a very fulfilling career out of it. रोज कुछ नया सीखने को मिलता है, and that keeps you going.
You are a technology person, Pramod. IT क्षेत्र की अगर हम मार्केट्स को देख के बात करें तो पिछले 8 महीनों से उनकी परफॉर्मेंस बिल्कुल अच्छी नहीं रही है। इट्स जस्ट अ फेयर ऑफ रिसेशन जो यूरोप में आने वाला है, जिसकी बातें चल रही है। द फेड एक्टिंग वेरी एग्रेसिव एज फार एज द इंटरेस्ट रेट्स आर कंसर्न्ड, इन्फ्लेशन कंसर्न्स आर रोमिंग अराउंड। आपको क्या लगता है टेक्नोलॉजी क्षेत्र जो जहाँ पे जिन लेवल्स पे अभी कामकाज हो रहा है इक्विटी मार्केट में, आपको लगता है कि दिस इज द राइट टाइम टू रियली एक्यूमुलेट दीस स्टॉक्स नाउ?
It all depends on your investment horizon. अगर आप long term investor हैं तो absolutely right. It is as good a time as it can get because the industry is going through a structural transformation. दुनिया में हर जगह digitization हो रही है, right? हर industry में digitization हो रही है, हर economic activity में digitization हो रही है। और उसके ऊपर there are cost pressures, particularly in the West, जो on-premise equipment cloud में shift हो रहा है. So that is barely scratch the surface in terms of penetration. तो ये इसका growth runway है जो है काफी बड़ी है. तो उस हिसाब से लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टर्स के लिए अच्छी टाइम है, बट द मार्केट ऑलवेज रिएक्ट टू शॉर्ट टर्म इवेंट्स, राइट. जस्ट लाइक ये डिजिटाइजेशन के चक्कर में काफी अच्छा किया था आईटी सर्विसेज सेक्टर स्टॉक्स, बट अभी रिसेशन के कंसर्न्स आ गए हैं. बट इफ यू लुक एट द वैल्यू ऑफ कंपनीज, द वैल्यू ऑफ कंपनीज लाई इन द कैश फ्लोज टू परपेचुइटी. What this year's earnings or next year's earnings do not contribute meaningfully to the value of the company. That's where arbitrage opportunity रहता है long-term investors को when the market reacts to such short-term events. ये आप अगर long-term view ले सकते हैं, this weakness can be a big opportunity because हाँ ठीक है, recession हो सकता है 2-3 quarter, maybe there will be a slowdown in IT spend that will affect this year's earnings. But this year's earnings does not contribute meaningfully to the value of the company. The value of the company is driven by the cash flow growth, the certainty of the cash flow growth over the next 10-20 years. And hence my view ki long-term investors ke liye IT services presents a big opportunity to invest today.
Pramod, do you think these IT companies will have to come out of these two regions जहाँ पे उनका काफी dependence है, your America and the Eurozone region, जहाँ पे उनके revenues अगर हम देखें तो maximum इन्हीं regions से आते हैं? Is it time to really get into new markets?
Well, I mean, they are expanding into new markets, but having said that, America is still the biggest market, right? Because the amount of opportunity there is, the amount of IT spend. Like I was saying, we were in the US a couple of months ago, and we were speaking to IT consultants in the US. From them, we understand that the penetration of cloud computing is so low today. Even in the US alone as an opportunity, if you just ride the increase in cloud computing, because several old industries are still operating on-premise infrastructure. All of this will have to move to cloud if these companies have to gain competitive advantage through technology and also operate it at a more lower cost through efficiency.
Pramod, Nifty has reclaimed 18,000 levels. We saw a very fast recovery. अगर हम जून lows से देखें 2022 के, तो करीबन 15-16% की रिकवरी हम मार्केट्स में देख चुके हैं. कोई कहते हैं कि ये बेयर मार्केट रैली है, कोई कहता है नहीं जी, बुल्स वापस आ गए हैं क्योंकि एफआईआईज वापस आ गए हैं. आप क्या मानते हैं?
हमें उस बारे में कुछ आइडिया नहीं है ऑनेस्टली. हम शॉर्ट टर्म देखते भी नहीं है, उसको समझना तो दूर की बात है. हमें काफी मुश्किल है. हम पहले शायद 15 साल पहले ट्राई करते थे ये सब चीजें समझने के लिए, बट आई थिंक वी हैव गिवन अप. वी वुड रादर फोकस ऑन underlying fundamentals of individual companies whose long-term prospects are far more within our grasp to understand and take a long-term call. America has had a good last 10 years, but it has its own challenges in terms of sustaining that. So therefore, if you are a pension fund or an endowment sitting in the US and looking to allocate some to international equities, India will show up on most of their radars as pretty strong.
Okay.
And if at all I have to hazard a guess in terms of why foreigners are pouring money into India, I think that can be an explanation because there is no other opportunity. And credit to Indian policymakers जो पिछले 8-10 साल में हुआ है, the policy changes, reforms. Initially, some of those reforms were causing short-term pain. जो banking system cleanup था, that took away the capital from the banking system, which took away the capital for credit growth and economic growth. GST was disruptive in the short term because India is a country of SMEs. SMEs got seriously affected after the introduction of GST. But both these were long-term positive. अभी देखिए banking system का capital adequacy ratio at its highest ever level of 17%. So if we see an opportunity for economic growth, the banking system is ready to fund that economic growth. GST has increased tax compliance. Today, tax to GDP ratio in India is at its highest level. Even the reduction in corporate tax rates that we took 3 years ago from 35 to 25% has also increased tax compliance.
अगर हम मार्केट्स की बात करें प्रबोध, तो काफी कंफर्टेबल हो गए हैं पार्टिसिपेंट्स विद हाई रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट। अब ये है कि फेड 75 बेसिस पॉइंट से बढ़ाता है या 50 बेसिस पॉइंट से, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता। आरबीआई को बढ़ाना है, फ्रंट लोड करना है, वो भी हम डाइजेस्ट कर चुके हैं। अब सिर्फ एक जो इन्फ्लेशन डीमॉन है, वहां पे अगर कोलैप्स देखने को मिलेगा, इन्फ्लेशन का कोलैप्स होगा, तो क्या आपको लगता है कि वो एक पावरफुल रैली को इंस्टिगेट करेगा?
Well, I mean, again, we are not experts on macroeconomy. ये तो Nobel Prize winning economist का काम है, because the world today is very, very complex, right? We have seen extremely low interest rates for such long periods of time that we don't know how the world will react when interest rates go up. Furthermore, you have Western governments which are heavily indebted. इनका debt to GDP ratios बहुत high है. So actually you don't know how much they will actually be able to increase interest rate. उनका interest rate बढ़ेगा तो government ही मुश्किल में पड़ेगा, right? और तीसरा है emerging geopolitical issues. पिछले 30-40 साल we saw massive globalization drive which reduced cost of production and kept inflation low. Today geopolitical issues are driving some sense of deglobalization, if you can call that, or at least diversification of sourcing, which means that you may not have the most optimal sourcing of factors of production, whether it's labor or resources, and hence inflation will remain elevated.
As you said कि हमको उन्हीं कंपनीज में इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए जो जिनके पास प्राइसिंग पावर होगा, तो इसका क्या मतलब बनता है कि हमको लार्ज कैप कंपनीज पे ज्यादा फोकस करना चाहिए देन द मिड कैप एंड द स्मॉल कैप कंपनीज, जो अब एक रन अप हमको देखने को मिल रहा है?
ऐसा कुछ नहीं है, इनको अच्छे कंपनी में इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए, वो लार्ज कैप हो, मिड कैप हो, स्मॉल कैप हो, उससे फर्क नहीं पड़ता, क्योंकि मार्केट लीडर्स ऑफ वेरी नीश इंडस्ट्रीज कैन बी स्मॉल कैप कंपनी, राइट? जैसे हमारे कुछ केमिकल कंपनी है, राइट? अल्काइल अमीन्स तो खैर अभी मिड कैप हो गया है, बट और भी छोटे कंपनी है, पोशाक जो हमारे पोर्टफोलियो में है, हम वी ओन दैट कंपनी for our clients as well as ourselves. It is a small cap company, but it is a dominant player in phosgene, right? वो particular chemical है, this is a number one player by a big margin, right? So this is a classic example of a market leader being a small cap company. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if you want to invest in companies with high pricing power, it has to be large cap. इनफैक्ट रिवर्स भी है, जो लार्ज कैप कंपनीज है, काफी कुछ लार्ज कैप कंपनीज है जिनके पास कोई प्राइसिंग पावर नहीं है, राइट? स्पेशली इन द एरियाज ऑफ कमोडिटीज, रियल एस्टेट, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर. इट्स वेरी डिफिकल्ट टू बिल्ड brands and distribution as a source of competitive advantage, and hence मेरे हिसाब से अच्छे कंपनी लेने चाहिए. अगर वो लार्ज कैप भी हो सकते हैं, मिड कैप भी हो सकते हैं, स्मॉल कैप भी हो सकते हैं. हाँ, मिड और स्मॉल कैप में थोड़ा शॉर्ट टर्म वॉलेटिलिटी ज्यादा हो सकता है, एंड हेंस इट इज मेंट फॉर ओनली दोज इन्वेस्टर्स हु कैन हैंडल दिस वॉलेटिलिटी, हु हैव सीन द मार्केट्स लॉन्ग इनफ टू नो दैट मार्केट तो ऊपर नीचे होगा ही, एंड देयरफॉर द ओनली वे टू मेक मनी इज टू स्टे इन्वेस्टेड फॉर द लॉन्ग रन, एंड टू स्टे इन्वेस्टेड फॉर द लॉन्ग रन इज नॉट इजी, because market आपको बहुत परेशान करेगा short term में. It will take you through a roller coaster ride which will drive irrational decision making. So unless and until you understand where you are investing, which company you are investing and why you are investing in that company, you should stay away from small and mid caps.
प्रमोद, अगर हम बात करें कुछ ऐसे सेक्टर्स की जहाँ पे काफी अच्छा मोमेंटम हमको देखने को मिल रहा है, एक है ऑटो स्पेस, वेरी एक्साइटिंग स्पेस, बहुत सारी न्यू लॉन्चेस हमने देखी है, ईवी को लेके काफी अच्छा सिनेरियो बन रहा है, डिमांड इज कमिंग बैक, योर कमोडिटी प्राइसेस आर ईजिंग ऑफ. हाउ डू यू सी दिस स्पेस पैनिंग आउट? जो मोमेंटम है, क्या वो आगे आने वाले समय में बरकरार रहेगा? और 4 व्हीलर्स और 2 व्हीलर्स में से आपकी पसंदीदा पिक जो होगी वो कहाँ पे होगी?
Right. ये sector actually is gone through a lot of pain over the last 5 years. काफी दिन बाद ये up cycle आया है, because 2017 to 20 we saw the down cycle, but 20 में जो pick up होने वाला था COVID की वजह से, it took another back seat, And just when earlier this year it was showing another signs of pickup, you saw the raw material price inflation affecting. So something or the other has held this sector back. So therefore, you can argue demand-wise there is an element of pent-up demand. So जो pent-up demand जब आएगा, तो it will have a good short-term blip at least. Second, like you mentioned, जो semiconductor shortage था, वो काफी कम हो गया अभी. Semiconductor supply has improved because slowdown globally across all segments has meant that semiconductor availability for automobile sector has improved significantly. And thirdly, raw material price जो आप बोल रहे थे, उसका भी काफी elevated prices से नीचे आ गए, and that is also helping the margin profile. So we should see this momentum continuing in terms of earnings, both top line and bottom line. Demand, like I said, is driven by pent-up demand, and earnings should benefit from lower commodity prices and lower input prices. How long will this sustain? Usually, auto cycle 3 साल तक चलता है, particularly if it coincides with a very strong product launch cycle. And I think it's been a while. Other than Tata or Kia, four-wheelers में हमने किसी other OEM, in fact Maruti का एक due है जो product launch cycle. That should help, and we've seen it work for Tata's in terms of market share gains. There's no reason why it shouldn't work for Maruti. But yeah, product launch cycle is a significant driver of growth for these companies, and hence I think the next 3 years should augur well. Between four-wheelers and two-wheelers, I think premium two-wheelers, of course, there is an opportunity. We are investors in iShares. We hold iShares, which manufactures the Enfield brand of bikes for our clients as well as in our own portfolios. There you might see an opportunity coming in because उसमें भी काफी 5-6 साल से slowdown हुआ है, उसका recovery आ रहा है. But otherwise, I think the four-wheeler cars should do well as well. Commercial vehicles, again, perhaps the biggest beneficiary if there is an underlying industrial cycle recovery. And like I was mentioning, there is a reasonable chance that we see a good industrial recovery because banking system is in good shape. We haven't seen a capex cycle for almost 10 years in this country, perhaps more than that. Yes. If all the sort of boxes are ticked, then commercial vehicles should also benefit from this sort of recovery.
Pramod, most of the market participants are now waiting for Q2 earnings because उनसे उसका clear पता चलेगा कि कितना impact हमारी corporate sector पर पड़ा है. आप Q2 earnings के base पे which are the sectors that you like the most and you think कि आगे आने वाले समय में अगले 2-3 साल के लिए these sectors should do well?
Well, हम लोग, I mean, we are the last people to look at quarterly earnings क्योंकि हमारा long-term investment philosophy है. We don't go by short-term trends. Having said that, we do follow quarterly earnings to understand if the companies that we've invested in are progressing in the direction that we expected them to. The precise numbers don't matter, but broadly the direction is important. उसके हिसाब से वो quarterly earnings important हो जाता है. We don't make an investment call based on one quarter's earnings. Like I was mentioning earlier, company ka value lies in the cash flows to perpetuity. That is the classical definition of value. Now, of course, nobody has seen perpetuity, but that doesn't mean that you don't take a long-term view. Long-term can be as long as 10-15 years. And for that, you need a much deeper understanding of the business beyond just the quarterly numbers. So, so unfortunately, I won't be able to comment too much on the Q2 numbers. But I reckon the trend should be positive. I think given that Q2 raw material prices would be lower than Q1, you should see some benefit coming through from a margin perspective. Demand-wise, I think year-on-year comparison might be slightly difficult because Q2 we did not have the same benefit as Q1 where the previous year had the Delta virus impact in terms of a lower base. So Q2 may not be. So year-on-year numbers might be lower, but which is exactly the reason why you should take a long-term view. Shorter-term view may some of these idiosyncrasies will not tell you the real picture. But broader trajectory, I think both demand and margin should suggest a degree of improvement in the right direction.
And the sectors that you like the most?
So we've been positive on financials, banks, NBFCs, insurance plays have been part of our portfolios across the board. We believe that, like I said, there's plenty of capital in the banking system. So you can see growth coming through without any dilution or without any need to raise further capital. Secondly, in a rising interest rate environment, better run financial companies will see margin expansion because इनके liabilities जो है, especially for banks, काका का cost बढ़ता नहीं है, लेकिन इनके loans के rate बढ़ जाते हैं, तो margin expand हो जाता है. Select NBFCs, not all NBFCs, because for most NBFCs उनका cost भी बढ़ जाता है, rate भी बढ़ जाता है, तो उसके हिसाब से margin कुछ ज़्यादा benefit नहीं होता है. But those NBFCs which have a strong liability profile, जो अभी भी low rate पे पैसा उठा सकते हैं money market से या CP market से or through retail deposits, they will see significant benefit of interest rates rising, and that should do well. Plus inflation should help loan growth from a nominal perspective, because remember the entire borrowing is based on nominal terms, and that should see growth. So growth and margins doing well should mean financials should do well. The second sector would be specialty chemicals. We are seeing significant shift in terms of sourcing from China to India. China has been a big supplier of all sorts of specialty chemicals to the rest of the world. Given what happened in China over the last 2 years, particularly this year's zero COVID policy driven lockdown has meant that a lot of Western buyers are looking for alternative sources of supply. India, luckily, बहुत सालों से has built a lot of capability within specialty chemicals. Good institutions like UDCT and all have contributed to significant talent available in India on chemistry and chemical engineering. And therefore, I think that sector provides a structural opportunity from a long-term perspective. I think with the automobile recovery that we talked about, auto ancillaries could also benefit. They usually benefit from a lag. पहले auto OEMs benefit करते हैं. Auto ancillaries are still not able to pass on all the price increases yet, but eventually, as the automobile cycle recovery increases, you should see that coming through, and auto ancillaries should also benefit going forward.
Last two quick questions, प्रमोद. आपने इंश्योरेंस सेक्टर की बात की कि आपको अच्छा लगता है, लेकिन इंश्योरेंस में अगर हम देखें तो बहुत धीमेपन से चल रहा है. बहुत ही लैक क्लस्टर परफॉर्मेंस इंश्योरेंस स्पेस में रही है, बिकॉज अंडर पेनिट्रेशन जो हम बात करते हैं अपने देश की, वो पूरा फायदा नहीं उठा पा रहे. तो ऐसे में इंश्योरेंस स्पेस पे आप फिर भी बुलिश रहेंगे?
राइट. तो इसमें दो तरह के इंश्योरेंस है, राइट? लाइफ इंश्योरेंस एंड जनरल इंश्योरेंस. दोनों के अलग अलग स्टोरी है. Anyway, both have had a pretty weak last 2 years. Yes. For various reasons. I think COVID was one of the reasons where both life insurance claims went up, and that meant losses for the life insurance companies. Even general insurance companies which sell health insurance, they also had to suffer. But looking at life insurance, इसमें penetration, particularly for term insurance and sort of participating in non-par policies, is still significantly low, and therefore the opportunity for long-term growth is still intact.
प्रमोद, इन्वेस्टर प्रोफाइल चेंज हो चुका है इंडियन मार्केट पार्टिसिपेंट्स का. 100 मिलियन डीमैट अकाउंट्स खुल चुके हैं और हर महीने लाखों अकाउंट्स जो है वो ऐड हो जाते हैं. नए निवेशक बाजार में उतर रहे हैं. जैसे कि आपने कहा कि हमारे जो इंडियंस है, इंडियन रिटेल इन्वेस्टर है, वो अवेयर हो रहा है फाइनेंशियल इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स को लेके, इक्विटी मार्केट्स को लेके. तो ऐसे में आपकी एडवाइस क्या रहेगी नए निवेशक जो बाजार में आ रहे हैं?
I would urge a word of caution because investing is seemingly easy. Investing seems like एक डीमैट अकाउंट खोल दिया, ट्रेडिंग अकाउंट खोल दिया और बाय बटन दबा दिया और पैसे बन गए. बन जाते, कभी बन जाते. If you were one of those lucky few जो मार्च 2020 में लॉकडाउन में बैठे करे क्या, चलो account खोल लेते हैं, and you started investing, you would have had a great time for the next 12 to 18 months thinking that you are the next Warren Buffett. But the market is a leveler. Eventually, the market will take you through ups and downs, in which case, if you haven't done your homework in terms of what sort of companies to buy and why you're buying those companies, you will be in for a lot of pain. And I'm sure पहले भी हो चुका है. तो इसीलिए we don't say that investing is complex. Investing is simple, but it's not easy. Investing is very commonsensical. But it is not easy because you need to put in the hours of the day. Just like any other profession, इसमें भी मेहनत करना पड़ता है, research करना पड़ता है, deep research पड़ता है. तो आपके पास समय है अपना research करने के लिए, तो by all means you should invest. It is a very, very satisfying profession, having been in this field for 20 years. It is enjoyable because रोज कुछ नया सीखने को मिलता है. गलतियां होती रहती है. All you need to do is ensure that you don't repeat those mistakes. But if you don't have the time, if you are a businessman who are engaged full-time in a business, or if you have a job where you have to focus your energies there, my advice would be to look at professional managers, whether it's mutual funds or PMSs or whatever applies. Give your money to professional managers who can manage it on your behalf. As far as equity investments are concerned, everybody should have a financial advisor, a financial planner to be able to handhold them through their financial savings journey. But for those people who can't dedicate time, I would caution them against investing directly in the market. The market is a very unforgiving place. You have to be very cautious. But for those who can invest time and energy and patience, it can be a very, very fulfilling journey.
Thank you, Pramod, for your time. Pleasure speaking with you, sir. It was a real lovely chat that we had, sir.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you so much. तो अब आज के लिए इतना ही. आप देखते रहिए जागरण बिजनेस.